Welcome everyone to this seminar on the Pole Quarter. It is a pleasure to have you all in the room, and also hello to everyone who's watching us in the broadcast of this webinar. First, a few announcements before I introduce our guest speaker. First, we have to do a land acknowledgement. The Center for Mexican Studies at UCLA acknowledges our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and ancillary territory of the Gabrielino Tonga people. Also, we would like to announce that also we will have the Latin American Institute reception on October 28th at 4 here in the Palm Court of this building of Bunch Hall. Also, we want to take a moment to just honor the memory of Ken Wong, the past director of the UCLA Labor Center, who passed away last week. He was a beloved teacher, labor activist, and students are organizing actually a memorial celebration here on campus tomorrow starting at 6 p.m. at Dickinson's Court on the south part of it. So if you would like to attend, that'd be great. And the students are really rallying around celebrating the work of Ken Wong. And so now I have the pleasure to welcome to our campus Mario Alberto Gómez Zamora, who's currently a UC Chancellor for Doctoral Scholar at UCLA in the Anthropology Department in Chicano Studies and Research, Chicano Studies Research Center. He was in that position over this summer. So thank you also for the Anthropology Department and Chicano Studies Research Center for co-sponsoring this event. So Mario Alberto Gómez Zamora is a first-generation P'urhépechas and mestizo scholar whose work bridges queerness, migration, memory, and indigenous performance within the Latinx and Latin American studies. As a UCLA Chancellor's postdoctoral fellow, he's developing his book, Queer P'urhépechas, Histories and Performances Beyond Borders, exploring cultural tensions faced by queer indigenous communities. His scholarship in poetry has been widely published, including award-winning work in Native American and Indigenous studies. And also he has brought some of his work in español, Entre el Recuerdo y la Memoria, Historias de Patamban. So please help me welcome Mario to UCLA. Thank you.
Okay. Can people hear me? Yeah. No, you tend to talk very loud. So thank you for the land acknowledgements. I have it here ready, but I will skip that for now. But I want to thank you, the Center for Mexican Studies, in particular to Dr. Gaspar Rivera Salgado, the Anthropology Department, and the Chicano Studies Research Center at UCLA for hosting me today. A special thanks to Dr. Jason De Leon for guiding me in the process of transforming my dissertation work into a book, to Roxanne Corville and Gabriel Collins for hosting me at their place this week. It was a little hard to get housing during these days, and they were very happy to have me there. Thanks to all the assistants, my parents, who are in the back, Lilia and Miguel Gomez. Yes, and I'm first generation student. I know first gen here in the US can also imply like, yeah, I migrated also with my parents. So thanks to Dr. Jessica Catalino for being here, members of the P'urhépechas community, Tío Gerardo González from Patamban, Michoacán, that's on the right side, on my right side, the P'urhépechas Studies Collective across the US and Michoacán, students and colleagues. So since I'm working on my book manuscript, I want to acknowledge today that I will focus on some specific chapters and cases that I address in my work, so I don't have the time to present everything, but yeah, I will be guiding you during the presentation on the chapters I will be presenting today. So let's start. And I will quote a feeling, a phrase of my students. I'm tired of always starting from zero. I'm tired of explaining to my family that I am not committing a crime for being who I am? What is enough, Mario? When will I stop having to advocate for being who I am? Every day after I wake up and about to start a fight against the world, it is difficult to breathe. These are some of the concerns my students raised in my Queer Indigenous Histories in America course in the summer of 2024. And I want to leave the audience today with this phrase, because not only the queer P'urhépechas community is guiding my work, but also the concerns of my students with whom I share space in the classroom. So in September of 2021, the body of a queer P'urhépechas man, originally from Santa Fe de la Laguna, en la región del Lago, was found by local dogs that pulled his corpses out from the ground in one of the streets of the pueblo. The man had disappeared a few days after the fiesta in honor del santo local. According to my research collaborators from the area, he was killed by local men, including a P'urhépechas man from the same locality, who was banned from the community by local authorities after the attack. There are no written records of the crime, since the local indigenous authorities deliberated the case according to the usos y costumbres, the local government practices of the pueblo. And there are no records in the news or social media. My informants believe that it was a hate crime. The victim was beaten by multiple men who probably were drunk at the time. The victim's body was buried in one of the streets of the pueblo, towards the Camposanto, El Panteón, and where the street dogs found him. And that's one case. In September of 2025, one of my P'urhépechas colleagues informed me, just last month, of another homophobic attack committed by various men in the P'urhépechas community of Aguirre, Michoacán, in 2024, so last year. The attack was recorded with a phone camera and was shared to my P'urhépechas colleague. Like these cases, in 1604, in Valladolid, Michoacán, 4 P'urhépechas men, Pedro Kini, Joaquín Sisiki, Francisco Capich, and Juan Indio, were accused of sodomy, or what was classified by the Spanish government and the Catholic Church as sins against nature. So I'm jumping hundreds of years, but I'm just bringing you these different landscapes of violence between the contemporary time and the colonial period. These 4 men were publicly tortured and killed in the plaza of Valladolid, now the city of Morelia, Michoacán, by Spanish authorities, to show the potential consequences to those who attempted to act against the sexual norms. Curiously, but no surprise, the public space to perform death is present in these cases. And it has been a significant element in many other cases of violence generated by the drug cartels in Michoacán. And I have to mention this because this is the ongoing violence we have in my home state. At least for the last 2 decades has been really bad. I want to pause here also just to point, this is a record from the archives, from the Archivo Histórico Municipal de Morelia. This document is from the 17th century, from 1604. And this page specifically records how the punishment must happen and the people implicated also in the punishment. So I have this for my dissertation, and I hope to bring these cases also to the book, even though I don't focus necessarily in the history, in the colonial history, but I'm trying to weigh these threats of violence. And this is like, I haven't been able to get very far, right? Like this is kind of like the closest thing I have of this public violence. And on the other side, we have another very important part of my work that has to do with the fiestas, with the traditions that we usually know, that we see in Facebook Live, that we see in recordings, that we see in YouTube, and has to do with the fiestas, the traditions of P'urhépechas communities. On the right side, we had Kevin, one of my interlocutors. Kevin wants me to use his name, and I'm happy with that because our histories have been already erased. So I supported Kevin's decision. He's wearing his Maringuilla mask, and now we talk about the Maringuilla a little bit later. But I want to have you these 2 different pictures of violence, death, but also celebration and fiesta and the pride, of indigeneity. So I took this photo of Kevin in the Mission District in San Francisco, California. So despite the temporal differences between these 3 cases, the history of the men in Santa Fe La Laguna and Aguirre, and the history of the queer P'urhépechas from 1604 are in a way interconnected, not only because they refer to the same ethnic group and the cases happening in Michoacán, but because these cases relate to the punishment, death, and forgiveness that precede the lives of queer people. So there is a concept that is important for me to explain and also for you to understand what I'm talking about. And that's el costumbre. P'urhépechas practice el costumbre, and there are many other concepts and many other concepts that are part of the cosmogony of being P'urhépechas, right? I will focus just on this one for today. In P'urhépecha, costumbre is pindecua, and it is called, is how it's called in the P'urhépecha language. El costumbre refers to the way of being P'urhépecha, and is represented by a series of customs and traditions that give a sense of identity and cohesion to the group. Many of these traditions follow the cycle of the corn, el maíz, and other pre-colonial practices. The cisgender heteronormativity is crucial in el costumbre. El costumbre shapes the social, cultural, and political organization of the P'urhépecha people. Paradoxically, through el costumbre, queer P'urhépechas finds way to participate within the collective, but with certain limitations. So this project is about the complexities of being queer and indigenous. It is about the tensions P'urhépecha people, including cisgender women, face when they challenge the gender binary, and the P'urhépecha traditions that require cisgender heteronormativity in Michoacán and the United States, where P'urhépechas had migrated at least in the first decades of the 20th century and probably even before that. I want to pause here again that many of my interlocutors who are queer say, yeah, I can be queer and I can also be P'urhépecha, why not? And the complexity of this violence makes, these decisions and public decisions of being who we are a little bit difficult, right? Because sometimes our lives are in danger. So I want to present you also the literature with the one I'm engaging. So the bad literature I analyzed to complete this project didn't address exactly what my interlocutor says, and I also say, how can one be indigenous and queer at the same time in instances where indigenous tradition required that one fit into a gender binary? And this becomes even more complicated with migration, because many of the migration studies, books and literature that I reviewed tend to say that through migration, and not everyone, but tend to say that through migration, people tend to liberate and to find, other possibilities. This is not the case when you migrate to a community who lives in diaspora and who made everything possible, and Adelaida maybe knows this, to reproduce what we do in Michoacán. Another of my bodies of literature is critical indigenous studies, of course, migration studies, and performance studies has been really a window for me to access to the world of Kevin, for example, to the fiestas, to what happens in the public space, right? And how queerness, in a way, is embraced by the community during the fiestas. It's a different story beyond the fiestas. So traces the histories of my interlocutors in Michoacán and sites of migrations. I combine research methodologies from the social science and humanities, including oral histories, semi-structured interviews, participant observations, and archival research in these methodologies and what I call talking while walking through the landscape. And following also the fiestas, the celebrations, this talking while walking is happening along with what is going on in the community in terms of fiestas. What I call talking while walking is an embodied indigenous methodological practice that is lived during celebrations and during intimate conversations while eating, drinking, walking, or doing, which in my work created the opportunity for opening conversations and establishing trust with my research participants. So this mix of fields of study was the only way I saw possible to do this research. So I had to combine different approaches to engage with different literature, to come out with this plan of talking or walking. And it's something I realized as I was completing my work in Michoacán and not finding time to sit with a person on a chair because we were moving. Now we get very mad with IRB and with these protocols because how we do research and how we are, and many people know here, like, it's not how research happens really in the field. So just also to point out that part. My reflections are the result of 3 years of fieldwork. Now has been 3 years between September of 2022, when I went back after COVID, or when I already was vaccinated and I was able to go back to Michoacán, and August of 2025. I just completed other interviews while I was here at UCLA as a fellow, and I was able to travel around the the LA area to interview P'urhépechas. And this my research included research in the Archivo Histórico Municipal de Morelia, which I already mentioned, and with P'urhépecha communities in the state of Michoacán. And I'm pointing here with a hummingbird. Maybe you cannot see it. It's right here, the state of Michoacán. I also completed some research in Illinois with P'urhépecha communities there, north and south of California and Oregon. So those are my research sites. Of course, P'urhépecha people, we are in many other places. Washington, Utah, Nevada, Minnesota, Ohio, North Carolina, Florida, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Wisconsin, Texas. But I don't have enough life and money to travel to all these places. So I chose the places where I also already have some network, some connections, and I was able to manage the trip, right? In some way. Also, there are P'urhépechas in other parts of Mexico and the world. I know there are P'urhépechas living near the border in Baja California. So, I don't want to assume that we are only migrating to the north, right? In the US. On the other side, we have a map that my dad made for me for this article that I published last year. So he loves to paint, and he has been always painting. We pointed the P'urhépecha region based on the division proposed by the Instituto Nacional de Geografía y Estadística. It's too much to translate right now that. In purple, we have the Región de Zacapu. That represents the purple corn. We have the lake where the first attack happened, that I mentioned it. We have the Sierra in green and the Cañada region that connects. It's like a corredor de pueblos. So just for a little bit of context of where we are in terms of the research sites and the location where I am moving to do this work. In my book, I analyze the histories of queer P'urhépechas and P'urhépecha women, as well as the gender binaries that P'urhépecha people reproduce through ceremonial performances, political organizations, and the wearing of traditional garments. And I argue that amid the gender binary that structured P'urhépecha traditions, P'urhépecha women and queer P'urhépechas have drawn upon customary practices and performances to challenge that binary, to transform it, and to reclaim their histories and roles in the community. That's the big argument that is guiding the writing of this book right now. And I want to introduce you to my chapter outlines, what I have so far. It may change a little bit. My idea is to have like a book proposal early next year. We'll see what happens. So these are the book chapters. I hope they're legible for you to read it from the audience. But the first one, and is the one I'm covering today, a part of this chapter is the one I'm covering today, is Queer Indigenous Methodologies of Talking While Walking, a personal approach alongside my Papa Quique. And I say in the title of this presentation, agarrándonos hasta lo imposible, because it's how I feel, and I know it's how many of my interlocutors feel when we have to find queer histories that were not just about violence, that were about celebrating life of queer Indigenous people. And there are not that many, right? Like the first histories I heard, and I will talk a little bit more about that, were very derogatory, they use derogatory terms. They didn't dignify the lives of queer Indigenous people. And that's another part that I'm trying to do through this work. The question that guides this chapter is, what do the cases reveal, the cases I mentioned before, about the intentional elimination of histories and bodies that destabilize gender normativity? And we have my grandfather, who is one of my most important interlocutors in the book. I'm trying to portray here this practice of talking while walking with him. I will talk about him in a little bit. The second chapter is Marco Soriano, Dancing with the Heart from Pichátaro to Cumicho, Michoacán, paying my bow, because Marco was paying a bow as a Maringuilla. I won't engage with this right now, but that's another aspect of this research. And the question here is, what does giving from the heart through ceremonial dances for queer people reveal about the relationship between queerness and religion? The third chapter is Vicky and Kevin, Creating History and Culture Beyond Gender Binary Borders in California and Michoacán. The question here, and I will talk about Kevin today in specific, what are the dichotomies of embodied performances and gender binary expectations within el costumbre, which I already explained it, especially when the local memory and queer performances reconfigure traditional rituals and customs. So this is chapter 3. The last two chapters, Junuen Gonzalez, Helen Ñañez, and Luz Marquez, Las Maestras, embodying teaching and Purépecha danzas in California and Illinois. The question here is, what does the expansion of gender binary roles reveal about understandings of gender and sexuality among the Purépecha collective? Cisgender Purépecha women, some of them queer, have very interesting comments about how the community understands their bodies when they don't have kids, how the community understands their bodies, especially men, when they are single, and how in danger they are either in the community if they don't have a man. So this chapter is about those tensions. Chapter 5, Abraham and Stephanie Patricio creating alternative words through theater and comedy in Aguatzen, Michoacán, and Portland, Oregon. The question here is, what do performance and queer indigenous humor teach us about an audacity that is by default needed to survive the embodied transgressions of gender binary and geopolitical borders, and thereby generate alternative futures? This will be the last chapter, and I'm trying to leave the book with a more futuristic feeling. I don't know to say more hopeful, but hopefully we pass to follow, which many of us didn't have. We have a photo of a late queer Purépecha comedian, Stephanie Patricio. Stephanie passed in 2020 in a car accident, and I'm really trying to include Stephanie's history and work in my work. There were a comedian, also an activist working for the ULW, for the Unión de Trabajadores, UWA, or whatever are the acronyms. So, Stephanie's in chapter 5, and I hope that I can bring really and honor their memory and their legacy in this work. So, let me go back to chapter 1. Due to a lack of time, of course, I will focus only on responding to the question signals in chapter 1 and 3, as I say. Just to go back and remind you what I was trying to cover here is, what do the cases reveal about the intentional elimination of histories and bodies that desestabilize gender normativity? I focus on analyzing how queer histories are erased to enforce straightness and gender binary practices in Purépecha communities in Michoacán. Often, queer Purépecha histories are tied to social chaos and the violence committed against their bodies. The embracement of queerness by Purépecha members is contradictory, since the communities tend to silence queer histories, and many times they partner with the state and other local institutions in the extermination of queer people. Just a very quick note, sometimes when the government find a body of a trans person, they tend to say that was a man dressing as a woman. So, used to say how they tend to erase identities and really take away the dignity of the person. So, in this chapter, I demonstrate that queer Purépecha histories are unstable and non-linear, and that queer Purépecha bodies have been hunted and their history distorted, provoking fear and false speculations about queerness among the collective. And this is a part of the chapter has been published in the Genealogy Journal. That's the one that won the Native American Studies and Indigenous Studies Association recognition this year. So in case you want to engage with some of the work that I have been publishing already. So let's explore how this research happened while talking and walking. So I want to introduce you a little bit to this. From my journey as a teacher and interdisciplinary scholar, I have collaborated with multiple projects to preserve the oral traditions of Purépecha communities and expand the borders of the classroom by relying on the streets and the wisdom of the elders, where the emergence of knowledge is always ongoing. In 2017, my middle school students from Patamban in the Sierra P'urhépechas in Michoacán and I achieved the publication of the oral history book that is here, Entre el Recuerdo y la Memoria, Historias de Patamban. For people on the Zoom, so this is the cover of the book, and for people here in person, I have some copies here to distribute some people who are interested in oral histories. So we were able to hand a copy of the book to elders who passed it to us histories, and in 2024, we achieved a publication of the same book with translations into Purépecha and English. So this has been an ongoing project for me. This was my master's project when I was a master's student in Michoacán, in Universidad Michoacana from 2014 to 2016. And the intention of the master's was to propose an alternative teaching strategy or didactic for the classroom or for outside the classroom. In my case, it happened outside the classroom to destabilize the normativity of the classroom. I work with a student from Patamban, from where Tio Gerardo is from. He's standing. The students guided me where to go. They knew histories already. They just told me where to go and to whom we could interview. Many of the elders already passed it, and it has been my work, my passion to bring this book back. And it's how I got to meet Tio Gerardo. And Tio is a palabra that we use to honor and respect elders in the community. So through this book, I have been able to meet new queer P'urhépechas. So that's what I say is part of also my recent methodologies in a way, because I have been meeting elders and I have been meeting new community by bringing this book back to the community. And when I was here, I presented the book in Rialto in the backyard in one of the community members. We have a tole de grano, we talk. I introduced the book, and it has been, this labor. I brought the book to the community again in September to the schools. So hopefully they can use it as a trilingual book to teach English and oral histories and P'urhépecha, of course, in the classroom. So this is the book. The book doesn't have queer histories. So a pause there, and it was also something I became aware as I was completing my new project. As I embraced my queerness publicly, I became aware of the lack of histories in that book, and I started to feel conflicted with the histories Papa Quique passed it to me. And for example, Papa Quique recalled that in the early 1940s, when he was a chamaco, a teenager, one of those days while walking through the P'urhépecha mountains in Michoacán, carrying artisanal products for his mother from Patamban to his hometown, Paracho, he stopped to rest in Santa Cruz Tanaco, one of the localities in the heart of the P'urhépecha mountains. While sitting outside a small grocery store and providing water to his horse, he spoke to an elder in the town. The elder shared with my abuelo, and I quote my abuelo, "One day, planes, like those big things flying in the sky, we destroy towns, and men, we try to be women, and women, we try to be men." The elder's premonition coming from the voice of my abuelo sounded like an apocalyptic end of the world. The most interesting part was when my abuelo said, "Look, mijito, those things are already happening. Look how the raza, la gente, we don't even know what's going on and who is who." Papa Quique referring to queer people in our community who challenged the gender binary by wearing clothes that, in the eyes of my abuelo, didn't correspond to the social expectations for biological, with quotes, women and men, or who were contesting the traditional order. In my search for queer P'urhépecha histories, I have also relied on the testimonials of other queer P'urhépechas, newspapers, and information in digital platforms like Facebook and Instagram. A common thread in these histories is the violence against queer bodies and the tensions queer P'urhépechas encounter to navigate indigenous traditions. This becomes an issue when queer or trans people want to participate in the usos y costumbres del pueblo that demand the gender binary. And for example, there are couples of P'urhépecha men who are questioning about who we occupy the women role in the fiesta. Like the community really needs to know who is the women for the fiesta, who we perform certain, and during the danzas, during certain rituals, they want to know who is the women. So, see, gender roles regulate the social organization for fiestas, for the saints or weddings. Because of the enforcement of the gender binary and the need to portray women and men in a relationship, men P'urhépechas couples are also questioning about who occupies the women role in sexual encounters. So they get that part. There are also cases of P'urhépechas who migrated to the United States as cisgender men and who transitioned during their time in El Norte. This is the case of a person in La Cañada region who say they transformed their body while living in the US. According to my informant, this person is over 60 years old and returned to the community about 4 years ago. Now, maybe like 5 years ago. My informant heard that while this person live in the US, they have surgery to increase their breasts and dressed as a woman. Or at least this is what locals, el chisme, the gossip in the town say. However, now that they is back in the community, they minimize their gender expression and only use lipstick. And I quote my informant, he doesn't dress anymore as a woman. and he's a very lonely person. My informant indicated. I use they pronouns when I talk about this person because I don't know how this person identified, even though my informant say he. Used to point out this. I didn't talk to this person, but this is one of these figures that community really recognize as someone unstabilizing the norms. So this confronts the isolation and internal community violence many members of the LGBTQ plus community face. In this case, P'urhépechas also respond to the traditions of the group, where the gender binary many times forces queer members to minimize their gender expressions to be at some level accepted by the collective. In some cases, this also has to do with the safety of queer bodies. For example, my research collaborator, Abraham, from Nahuatl, Michoacán, recognized that his parents will not have an homophobic reaction towards him when he came out as marica, and that they will most likely support him. But his father's response was supposedly complicated. Abraham recalled his father saying this: "I don't have problems with that, but please don't make it noticeable, because then you get drunk and dance. You guys," referring to the homosexual community, "are loud when you dance, and then you cry and you start a party when you get drunk. People don't like that. That is what happened that to Tobias, a local homosexual man killed by community members, because he was too noisy, and that's not okay." That's what the dad told to Abraham. Tobias was killed by locals during a jaripeo, or rodeo, in the community. According to histories of the community perceived from the attack, Tobias touched someone's buttons, and for this reason, he was killed. These different narratives confirm that the murder often precedes the lives of queer indigenous people. This blurriness and suffocating landscape mobilized my search for queer histories so others don't have to start from zero, as my students express. So this is part of chapter 1. I need to move forward to the next one. But if you are interested in reading a little bit more about this, is in the Genealogy Journal piece that I published last year. So to explore other queer histories, queer P'urhépechas histories, and possibilities that emerge from the borders of the indigenous traditions and queerness, we will move forward to a case from chapter 3. And we have here the question for chapter 3. I want to repeat it, just like audience know. What are the dichotomies of the embodied performances and gender expectations within el costumbre, especially with the local memory and queer performances, reconfigure traditional rituals and customs? And now we focus on the history of Kevin Torral. So Kevin Torral, a 23-year-old queer P'urhépecha, originally from Calzoncillo, Michoacán, embodied many of the complexities of the P'urhépecha normativity. These practices embed the costumbre paradigm, or the way of being P'urhépecha, which tradition follows the agricultural calendar. I met Kevin in late April 2023 in a park in the Mission District in San Francisco, California. Kevin agreed to talk to me about his experiences as Maringuilla, but also about his migration and indigenous embodiment and the ways he navigates gender binary traditions. The testimony of Kevin had various ages, some related to his time growing up in Michoacán and the homophobia he faced in his family and community, and his migration to the United States when he was 17, and the obstacles he overcame in a foreign country. And I need to drink water before I continue. So I want to pause here to introduce the Maringuilla devices. I'm sure some people have questions about it, right? So these are the devices from this community. So it could be different in other communities, but mainly the Maringuilla, usually we wear a mask that covers the identity of the person. The mask, as you can see, is white. That represents the Virgin Mary. They also have a rebozo, which is very common in P'urhépecha communities. Wanengo, you can see a little bit part of the Wanengo here on Kevin's photo. A nagua, that's the skirt. A faco, this is very heavy also. I don't even know, maybe Adelaida knows how heavy the dress is. And they dance with this for hours and days. A belt that tie everything, and a tanarikwa, the apron that is very colorful, that is the one that we usually see. There are very interesting things that I don't mention in this chapter, but in Oregon, I learned that women who are married, if I remember correctly, wear double tanarikwa. In the case of the community it was a community near Paracho, and I don't want to, say the name, but there are some communities that did recognize the hierarchy, right? Who is married. So in the case of Kevin, when he was a teenager, his brother-in-law and other community members tried to teach Kevin how to dance as one of the male danzantes. Male danzantes could be viejitos in some communities, could be curpites, could be feos. There are many other characters. I don't focus on those characters, and I don't necessarily focus on the performance of those characters. I focus on the relationship between the Maringuilla and this homoerotic relationship with the male characters, but most important for me, how the community accepts the Maringuilla, disrupting the gender binary during the ceremonies. Just to point out that I don't focus in those other aspects, at least not right now for this book. So when Kevin was a baby, he had health complications, and his mother promised Amanda a vow to the Divino Salvador, local saint, that if Kevin recovered, he would dance in the local danzas when he was old. Due to this promise, Kevin had the pressure to perform in the danzas as one of the local characters. His brother-in-law asked him to dance as Maria, since it was the dance Kevin was able to perform without complication. Kevin was trained as a Maria by former Maringuillas in the pueblo. The former Maringuillas taught him how to zapatear and move his body with elegance. And in another of the chapters, when I talk about Marco, I talk more about the body movement and the hips. In the case of Kevin, he dances more, not as expressive. Other Maringuillas dance very provocative. So it changes, and one Maringuilla can shift depending on the community where they are performing. So Kevin, I think he only dances with his community there or here when they invite him. Although Kevin moved to the United States after high school, he would return annually to his community to perform in the regional competitions of curpites. In his second year competing in Michoacán, he won first place with his group, which brought him popularity among the P'urhépechas pueblos and via social media. So when we met, Kevin said, that was when we met in 2023. I brought my dress, referring to everything, and also Kevin knows how to make this. He made also my stole for my graduation. So it's just in case you want to know. I brought my dress. I don't know why, but I brought my naguas and everything. In our conversation, he emphasized it. Once you are Maria, you respect that. Even if the community invites me to dance in the last minute, you have to attend the call. So es su responsabilidad ir a bailar. He has to go to dance. It's not questionable. In California, he takes his Maringuilla dress beyond the celebrations and community competitions because he likes to wear the dress and all the accessories which he made since he learned how to wave in Michoacán con su abuela. Although Kevin has experienced a certain level of acceptance as Maringuilla by his community, that has not been the case when he started to include feminine adornments as part of his daily clothes, so outside the performance and the ceremonies. Kevin stated, immediately you'll feel the gaze of people looking at you, but since they don't feel me, I don't care. He distanced himself from family and locals from Calzoncin to avoid uncomfortable moments, seeing his identity beyond the Maringuilla character was not well received. The testimony of Kevin presents several nuances. First, in Michoacán, when a teenager, he was encouraged to participate in the danzas as a Maringuilla, since it was the role he could perform with more ease. And it was his obligation because his mother made a promise to the local saint. Second, Kevin honored el costumbre, and he served his community and other community, P'urhépecha communities, through his transnational Maringuilla performance and artisanal knitting. Third, he recalled feeling proud of his indigenous roots and the traditional dress of his community. He also appreciated traditional female dresses from other cultural groups, which he sometimes wore, and he posted on Facebook about that. Nevertheless, when people from his community noticed Kevin using the Maringuilla dress beyond the confines of the celebrations, he experienced rejections, particularly by some family members who live in San Francisco. This situation pushing him to isolate from the group. He experienced discomfort when he would attend events only as Kevin and not as Maringuilla. Through these complications, Kevin continued attending P'urhépecha events in Southern and Northern California because he liked to bring flowers to the local saint and to dance as Maria when the community is asking. And because being Maria is a vow for life. So we are getting to the end of this presentation. I know it has been a little bit like a lot. I'm sure you have questions for the Q&A. And I wanna have time for that. So final reflections. Well, through this work, I seek to recover queer P'urhépechas histories. I also push the borders of disciplines and research methodologies. I overcame the feeling of having to ask for permission to do my scholarship the way my heart feels right. The academic space has frequently tried to force me to fit into a box of parameters that I don't want to fit. My work is queer as my way of being and breathe is. And that's why relying on various disciplines and ways to do research was essential to me to recollect and analyze queer P'urhépechas histories. And I want to pause here again just to bring my students back to the picture since I started with them. This is the second time I taught the same class, Queer Indigenous Histories in the Americas, and something we feel with my students we needed to do, especially when this political moment was to portray the futures that we want right now. We did an art gallery with my students that we call Queer Indigenous Futures. We presented this art gallery at UC Santa Cruz, where I was a grad student in the Institute of the Arts and Science, and the students curated and made the gallery. At least to find a channel to release all this energy. I know this is not a solution, but that was for us a way to work together on this and to find some avenues to probably portray the futures we want, and they are not just dead, this chaotic landscape. I don't imagine another way to do this work, but it was even more important to trust my intuition and the ways I learned to maintain the collective memories and the traditions alive via the voices of my ancestors and my queer P'urhépechas interlocutors, while we talked and walked and trusted each other's histories. This is the way my ancestors have preserved the collective memory, by moving and embedding everything around us. To end, I want to emphasize that this book is not only about queer P'urhépechas histories, dances, and queer indigenous practices that destabilize the normativity. It is also about imagining and fighting for a queer future that we urgently need, because we deserve to live with dignity, without fear to be persecuted or murdered, but with joy as part of the collective, as my students and queer P'urhépechas interlocutors taught me through their art and performances. We are here, we have always been here, and we will always be. Muchas gracias, meamecua, thank you.
So let's open it up for questions. Could we change the camera so he can see maybe the questions or?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't want you to be standing. If you want to see for the.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah. Just come here. And now will adjust the camera and go. Reactions, questions. Take the floor.
Let me get my notebook. I get 10 minutes to write.
And if you want to just introduce yourself, that'd be great. The name and application. Go ahead.
That's all that you get.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Renzo, the Department of Epidemiology. I'm curious, ended with not wanting to be in a box, and you want to make your research in different perspectives. I'm curious if you've ever considered public health and public health outcomes with your work, because I'm seeing a lot of stress and anxiety in the community, and that could easily go towards physical, mental, and emotional health problems.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have been thinking about the second book, and that's something I have been thinking about: mental health and also AIDS. That's another topic that has been present in some of the conversations about sexual transmission infections. Mental health, for sure, that has been a concern, I think, of almost every interlocutor I have. So, yeah, definitely, and thank you for asking this. This inspires me more to keep thinking about, I think the second project may go towards that, about the part that you say about not wanting to be in a box. Yeah, it has been hard in academia because I don't come from a family in academia, right? Like my parents do other things, and when I get to these spaces of many people here, I frequently feel that, I think especially the first years as a grad student, I feel like I needed to demonstrate that I was good enough to be there. Then I didn't care about what professors or people would think. I think that the work I learned to do in academia, of course, but also with my communities, I don't need to explain it, and that's something I think in the methodologies is when I want to bring this idea of not wanting to be in a box more, and how I'll challenge the IRB, right? Like questioning these practices that I think instead of creating trust and protecting my interlocutors, they protect the IRB, but they don't really generate that trust and protection for my interlocutors because maybe they feel insecure and not safe with me. If I want to meet someone in a little room, like in this box that I can see in a cubicle, like that's another part of this idea of the box. But yeah, thank you.
Sorry, related. Jonathan Naranjo, an undergrad student in the anthropology department. But on the same topic about methods and not wanting to put the box, with the talking while walking, you were describing about like, eating with people and having conversations while talking, like while walking. Normally I've seen that put under the same box as like, participant observation, all of it just falls under that umbrella. But I noticed you have participant observation and talking while walking different, separately. And I just wanted to ask why you felt the need to distinguish between the two.
Yeah, good question. I really feel they needed to distinguish that because I think this is an embedded indigenous methodology that doesn't need, in a way, the academia to exist, right? It has been always the way how this book happened, for example. This was made by middle school students who were 13, 14 years old. They didn't know about participant observations. They didn't know about oral histories in the way. It was just their way of being and existing in the community with this knowledge that is always, present. And another important thing, especially with my abuelo, it was very emblematic for me walking with him and feeling that he was the voice of the mountains as he talked to me about paths that didn't exist anymore. The paths where he walked. I don't think that for me was participant observation. It was for me really engaging with other humans, more than humans, with other entities in the landscape, that through the voice of the elders, I was able to access those histories. So it's also, I think, in a way, as an insider and outsider in a way, because I'm also, in the community, but outside the community, participant observation really didn't. It's part, I think, is embedded in a way, but it's not, I think, the main flesh of this work. Yeah. Yes.
And I'd love to follow up on that question and just have you talk more about the kind of the walking while talking and what kinds of situations does that put you in? Where did you walk? What kind of talking? Like, is there a sort of type of talk that happens that you're more focused on in those circumstances that's different from the way people might talk in, say, a classroom setting or, in another observation setting? So I'd just love to hear you expand on the kind of talk and the kind of walk.
Yeah. Also, talking about walking in this case, especially in the ceremonial space and the rituals, sometimes it's dancing as we move.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's dancing and eating and walking at the same time because everything is happening so fast and so dense at once. I remember one talk with Marco, and he asked me to carry his mask because he was worried to fall. Because they get very sweaty, it's very hot. It was in the middle of the day. He was wearing these big heels also because they fight to be the más perra in the danza. And I love that they're very divas. And we talk many things, very intimate things that I don't think I would put in the book. But there was this, I think we started to develop trust in each other histories. We talk about intimacy. We talk about, we joke a lot about he falling during that moment, like a rest. No, I will never forget he said that he would fall like como una vaca, and really maybe hurt himself. But during those moments also, he would talk about his, a family member, and I didn't want to say too much details, but was having a surgery. And he was dancing the whole week to offer the dance. So everything would go okay with the surgery. So all these different conversations happening while moving, sometimes sitting, resting, sometimes, okay, continue. And after that, he invited me to follow him to the next town. And I walk again with him. And as we were walking in another community, men were standing in a corner in this macho position drinking, started to do this. Like, and the carguero, the leader of the community, asked me to be the company for Marco, just to make sure that he will be okay. So that was another situation where his body was more vulnerable. Is this like, similar with my abuelo, is shoulder with shoulder, is walking next to one another and experiencing some things that I also feel scared in that moment. Like there were like 3 or 4 people. It was in this limbo, like even in like dark, you can see faces, but maybe not. And we were walking to the plaza where he will start performing. So, and this talking about walking sometimes could happen there, sometimes could happen close to the mountains, like with my abuelo or with elders who say, "Oh, walk with me as I'm getting to, to go to get water, and I can talk to you about this history." So I'm talking about walking happening also in the plaza, sitting, not necessarily walking, but sitting in the public space where, especially with elders who were not queer, they would talk to me about their perceptions of queerness. They would point out to me, you need to talk to this person because they are like that. And I talk about this in chapter 3. They didn't say necessarily queer. There are other terms that I mentioned in the book that are in P'urhépechas, like charita or nanak tatak, tatak nanak. There is another that refers to boy and girl. So there are combinations of terms, but sometimes I will say, talk to those who are like that. Now, and I think the chapter may start with that. I don't know. I have an article that is coming out with that title, but that phrase was very powerful. And sometimes also I was about to cry. So when we open about what I was doing this work and how connected I was to my heart, talking about walking also was very like, okay, I need to open more. And once I open my heart more, people will share also more intimate things. So that's a little bit about talking about walking. Yeah.
Wonderful presentation. I really want to read the book. I also want to read that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
You were talking a lot, and that's the way you started actually, about the public sphere, the public space, and of course the different fiestas and festejos where the queerness comes to the fore and then it vanishes again. But what about the domestic space? What is your thought about the domestic and the P'urhépechas queerness? I don't know if you know a short film by Miguel Ángel Caballero. Miguel Ángel Caballero is a Michoacano filmmaker. I don't know if he is P'urhépecha. He is queer. And he has this beautiful short film that is called, and I'm sorry if I pronounce this badly, Aquiceramo. And it's a pueblo, se llama Aquiceramo. And it's about a gay couple, elderly gay couple. That's also very interesting about age, the elderly queers. And his partner, they live in this house in El Pueblo, and they're discriminated upon. And he becomes a widow. His partner dies, and then the son of his partner, who is also queer but más o menos closetero, comes back and has a conversation with the partner of his dead father. And everything happens indoors. So you see this pressure, and I wonder if sometimes el espacio público es menos peligroso que el espacio doméstico. So I don't know if that will have a space in your book. And of course you are doing me encanta eso de hablar caminando. I don't know what would happen when you are caminando, you enter the home. If it opens up more dialogue, or it does exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
Because this idea of the domestic sphere as a safe space often doesn't work. Certainly not for many women, where domestic violence is more dangerous than parks and nature and the streets, right? So,
yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you also I think I met him in a webinar.
Okay.
So I haven't watched, I think, the documentary or the clip. So 2 things here. I think as I was doing research and I started to move across P'urhépechas communities, first in Michoacán, when they would tell me interview those who are like that, it will be more in these public spaces because of the fiestas. That's what I say also, my methodology follows el costumbre, the fiestas, the agricultural calendar And people sometimes we say, oh, you should come back to this other fiesta. Oh, I won't have money to come to this other fiesta. So that's one thing. In the private space or inside the houses, there are two things. One, in the case of Maringuillas, for example, they will say that that's the Maringuilla, the one they celebrate. When I am here eating with them, they don't really see me with that celebration. Or they may not even invite me to come to the house.
Okay.
That was one thing. And more intimate, like, I think for me sometimes was hard to access, especially when women were cooking and I grew up, a lot in the female domestic space with my mom and my grandmothers. But in the communities, if they didn't know me, I won't feel comfortable accessing to the kitchen, even though it's like this magic space for me where I feel safer than with the men. I didn't have always the access. Sometimes, I won't say sometimes, but that was more intimate for the women. And what I will see in that moment, it will be the division of genders.
Yes.
Very like women making tortillas, men, like distributing the alcohol. I talked to some elders inside their houses, oral histories, like more like some of them were sick also, they were not able to move. So I had some conversations inside, but I think because of the nature of the celebrations and how the community guided me to talk to those who are like that, most of this came from this performative space in a way. And I didn't have performance studies before in my work.
Yes.
It started to come more like embedded as I move forward. And now I'm a melon postdoc in the theater and performance studies in Stanford, right? So like that gave me access to another layer. And this audacity also, like being brave to be outside. I remember when Marco danced, there was another kid, a kid who was 18 years old. It was his first time dancing. He was so quiet, I couldn't talk to him.
Yeah.
He was very like shy.
Yeah.
All the women were around him, preparing him, dressing him, and protecting him, right? So there are some things that I couldn't, and I didn't want to go too much beyond the borders. But that's a good point.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Fernando.
Thank you, Mario, for that talk. I found particularly illuminating your discussion of Kevin. So the way I see your work is it has like two main, I think, subjects. One is to center queer identities within pueblos and costumbre, right? But I think that there's also an underlying theme that I think you can explore in the book as you are writing and drafting this manuscript about the nature of costumbre itself, this tension, this ongoing tension between the reciprocity and coercion that builds, that actually creates costumbre, really. That it's a set of norms that compel people to participate in these fiestas, but at the same time, all of these fiestas are, in a way, also compelling people to behave in certain ways. So this tension that Kevin really represents between I really want to participate in these fiestas, I want to perform the role, but at the same time, the norms and the expectations go against what he wants to do. And I think that all of these stories that you're telling are revealing that the norms really are what informs a little bit of the work that you're doing. It's the nature of a costumbre. So I wonder if you have some sort of reflection on that.
Yeah, thank you, Fernando, for that. In the chapter, I dedicate a section to unfold more the costumbre. And I also connected to the case of Abraham. That was kind of like in the dissertation chapter. Now that I am like kind of extracting just a few things from the dissertation, I will definitely think about where the costumbre, how it happens, not just defining like how it happens and how the complexity in the case of Kevin, like despite, I heard what you say, right? Despite this barrier, I go beyond with my queerness and breaking and challenging the gender binary. I want to be there because it's part, and I think that's a question in the argument, like how can one be indigenous and queer at the same time in this context, right, of the costumbre, for at least for P'urhépecha community. So I think I definitely I will dedicate time to explain more through different cases how the costumbre also is informing our decisions to participate or not participate. Yeah.
I have a quick follow-up question that is my ignorance. Why is it el costume?
Yeah, I know. I know.
Porque es masculino.
Yeah, and it's something I say also. Most of the literature I review it from the scholars, they say el costumbre. We could say pindecua, which is the term,
Ajá,
but no la costumbre.
ajá,
I don't think I have seen that much la costumbre. It usually has been el costumbre.
ajá.
And another person asked me that
Yeah.
before the dissertation came out. And I kind of went back to review the scholarship that I reviewed from P'urhépechas scholars from the 1990s or late 80s. And most of them say el costumbre. So I just follow that in a way. But that's something that, so I respect them. I know so many of them in person. But yeah, it's something that maybe I can try to challenge and change and maybe use the term in P'urhépechas. Also, the dissertation, was in English. Now the book will be in English. So it will be interesting when I translate, because my intention is to translate the book into Spanish.
Yes.
So we'll see what happens then with the translations. But that's something for me, it's important for me to know and keep it in mind.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so amazing work, Mario. I think that you did a lot of justice, especially like I'm from San Juan Nuevo, so we always have the Mariquilla every year, and like it's like the party of the year, right? Like the fiesta of the year. So I think like this is really eye-opening and it's really amazing what you're doing. I did have a question, and I think you do kind of probably go over it in your other chapters. So this is just more of my curiosity. Because I love the way that you explore the way of like los culpites and la mariquilla and how men are able to kind of use that to transform or challenge this binary. I'm kind of wondering if you found a similar costumbre for women. So like how do queer women draw on costumbres to transform this binary or challenge this binary? Is there one that you're looking into?
like if women are also finding through a performative space.
Yeah, like is there, because I was trying to think and I don't think there
Like
is,
queer
right?
women.
For the culpites,
Yeah.
it's mainly just men that are like performing. So I was wondering if there's something like that you found that in women.
Yeah, that's really important. So one thing that I mentioned, my colleague, Dr. Mincia Wanda Martinez Rivera, in her book, she talks about the danzas and the weddings in Angawan. And they talk about, in the book, she talks about how these danzas are also a transition into adulthood. So especially for, cisgender men, it's also the moment to kind of like, celebrate, be outside, but also this courtship, like to meet girls and eventually even maringuillas maybe get married, right? So I think for men, they have this transition through the performance phase that I don't think is very evident in the case of women or the queer P'urhépechas women I interviewed them. In the case of the not gender binary, Stephanie Patricio, I have heard through their family that they also perform it as a male character. And I know also in another community, I couldn't go to each community, but in Charapan, I know women are also performing as a male character. So I don't have that much data, that much information about that. I know Stephanie, and I have some photos of Stephanie dancing because the family was from the Región del Lago. And they danced the danza del pescado, the fish, like they're fishing. And Stephanie and the mom are performing as male characters. And I know also through their brother that these spaces opening for Stephanie in the migratory landscape are proud of indigeneity, like attending the celebration, starting to participate. And I think this really informed later the comedy and the queerness and how they played around. So I don't have that many cases like that. I recently recollected another story in the summer that I still need to, and this person was danzante.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a queer P'urhépechas danzante that I need to study more. I already mentioned that it will be in the book. So
Yeah.
yeah, her story was really powerful, and she started to dance very young. So maybe in a different complexity of like using the space kind of to perform his queerness and be like a butterfly. But I think the performance space open for this other person the opportunity to be a leader, which is not very common in some communities for women. So yeah.
Can't wait to read it.
Hopefully we'll be soon. Other question?
Yeah. I'm interested in hearing your reflections about also how public performance, especially for indigenous people, is happening in other parts of Mexico too. The Bella Mushe in Juchitán has been the center of a lot of attention thinking about the third gender. And it has been politicized because something that happened privately as a performer has become public and has become really a side of politics.
Yeah.
Of course, they're very visible, they're organized, and also they have a spread celebration among mushes in Los Angeles, in Mexico City, in San Francisco. And I think it's been a side of a lot of political debate about, what does it mean to be indigenous? What does it mean to be Huchiteco, not even something like Huchiteco? We're part of this costumbre, and already the public performance allows them, like the Maria, that contradiction, but then they have taken it a step farther to really organize a public discussion about gender violence. And of course, that, the fact that they're very visible doesn't stop a lot of the violence, but at least there is like a way to resist that and a way to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you are finding, that literature or those examples useful.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And my parents are always watching YouTube videos, watching I think I see many faces of this, right? Like many heads. Like how immigrants in this case who cannot maybe access or can attend celebrations, either here or there or wherever they're happening, they can see it sometimes, through social media or TV or YouTube channels. Another thing is like, for example, in Michoacán, with the Quinchecua, which is like a P'urhépechas celebration, like the local governments, I feel like also are taking advantage in a way to profit with the culture and the with the native. But also, I know artisans and people who dedicate their lives to do, clay work, use these spaces to promote their work. I don't think there is an easy response here to say like, because many artisans, they get invited and they can come to these places. And then we have another layer of tension because now these small communities, many tourist people, they don't want to go because through cartels.
Yeah.
So people are going outside to these celebrations organized by the government or no-profit organizations in the case of the US, where they can, they are bringing artists or artisans from Michoacán to here. So there is also an opportunity to promote their work. So I'm not the person to say this should not happen because I also go and attend and I feel very happy and excited to have the food, to engage in conversation with people. But I think it could be danger in some cases, like how the governments or the organizers are using the resources or the money, the transparency. And another thing that in the case of Juchitán and Muches, or in the case of other queer or other indigenous communities that break the binary, this could be also an avenue to be globally, vocal about the issues that are happening. So I would say what people in Cheran say. I will, let the community decide how they want to do what they want to do. Yeah, how they want to organize, if they want or not. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much for the amazing conversation. I was thinking about if you are doing or you establish some relation with another indigenous communities in Mexico. I was thinking in the Mushes community in Oaxaca, and I don't know if you thinking about it. And also, I want to recommend you another film. It's El Secreto del Río. It's about to know. Okay, so this is really amazing work. It can be some illuminating for you.
Yeah.
Research also.
Yeah, I have, I know other indigenous people. I have friends, other indigenous, people who are in other states or parts of the world or in the US. Um, I have found in the case of Oaxaca that are very well known, or other parts also with Native American communities here. I think in terms of gender and challenging the binary, that has been part of our DNA, our history. I cannot, we have a lack of, in the case of P'urhépechas, a lack of history to go back on time, how present that was before colonization. And always my response, I'm talking to a colleague, Professor Amaru Lucas, that Fernando knows. He told me, well, you guys are here. So you have always been here. He's an historian. So I think something from other indigenous communities to say, I think there are different terms and names, terminologies to understand queerness or to understand this destabilization of the norms. The most important thing for me that I have learned with other communities and with P'urhépechas communities has to do with the role and how the community understands how we act and how we are and what service we provide in the case of Kevin, right? That will define a lot how the community is understanding you. And they really try to understand the gender binary. And more than that is because they want to know what role you occupy in the costumbre. How will you participate in the fiestas? You will be able to have like a consular representation. So those are important things that I can see in other indigenous communities happening. So for example, the term tatak nanak or nanak tatak refers to a woman who act like a man, not like is a man. Act is a way of acting, the way of acting in relationship to the norms of the community. So in the case of the muches, I have seen also, some not maybe similar, but how the community are understanding them like another possibility for the gender. So that's what I can say about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Just maybe a quick comment. I think that point you just made was so important. I saw in the talk, but you really just brought out the importance of figuring out one's role. And that drives all kinds of different social relations, possibilities, limitations, but that's like a kind of necessary task. Both puts a certain kind of pressure on queerness, but also puts up possibilities. And I think that I can really now see that you said it, that I can see that back through lots of things in the talk, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I will keep that in mind for maybe future talks to point at this a little bit earlier. Yeah, thank you.
Can I ask something? This is so fascinating. You are a translational scholar and you also visit P'urhépechas communities here in the United States. And I was thinking about, these are so many things that come together. So for the festejos and the fiesta, you have to have a particular role, right? And that guides the conversation. But as you were saying, it opens up the possibilities. So I was thinking, for example, I heard through Gaspar and through Mauro, the organizer of the Guelaguetza, that when the Guelaguetza happens in Los Angeles and outside of Oaxaca, the bailes change in many ways. And then it goes back to Oaxaca and it changes the danzantes and the danzas in Oaxaca. Mauro was telling me that he was actually very proud of that. So would that happen also within the realm of queer P'urhépechas? Do you think that changing the festejos here could open up changes over there, back in Michoacán? And also, I was very moved by the story of one of your first cases that you presented, a man who was trans and then he got breast surgery, but when he went back to Michoacán, solo se pintaba los labios, right? So do you think there's more hope for queer P'urhépecha liberation when queers migrate? And can that change the whole costumbre actually, or resist costumbre from here back home?
Thank you for that. I think it's a very deep question. A little bit like many possibilities. I mentioned, I think when I started talking today about my different literature, migration studies, of course, how I realized it, that the communities try to reproduce, in some cases, no one's to say everyone. And I remember I was attending a community event here in Southern California, and the elders were telling me like the celebration was not happening how it used to be in the past. And there is always like, I have found this very interesting because there is a romanticization of the past being more original, or the native land being more original.
Yes.
And in this world, I have also learned that things are always changing and transforming. I don't say that migration is guaranteeing this liberation.
Okay.
Because it's not happening that way. We see the case of Kevin, who lives in San Francisco, and is isolated from the community. And Kevin goes back to dance. He used to go to, I don't think he has the time now to go back and dance there, but he used to go and dance in Michoacán and come back. So he would go for the dances and fiestas. I have seen adaptations, and I can see, when maybe they don't have enough danzantes, like who are women or men to occupy these gender binary roles, the community is adapting to what they have. Or they had more kids, coming up to occupy certain spaces maybe where they were not in the past. And I can see these adaptations informing things there, but also I see this circular.
Yeah.
I don't see this linear.
Yeah.
I think that's my response.
That's
And it's
great.
very unstable.
Very great response. I love it.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Please help me thank Mario Alberto for a great presentation. And you're gonna conclude the presentation. And if you are interested about the book, please come and talk to them. Here.
Gracias.
And there's more sandwiches and drinks, so please.